So here we go again with the idiotic rating agencies, which really they should be closed down. I mean, these things are the absolute worst. Today it is Moody's, or the other day it was Moody's, I should say, as opposed to S&P. But they're all bad. They're all terrible, and they're all clueless. So Moody's says if the Trump tax cuts are passed, are approved, it will downgrade the U.S. credit rating because the deficit will be too big. So here we go again, where the rating agencies do not understand the distinction between a currency issuing nation, where all of its debts are denominated in its own currency, and a currency using nation, or a nation, as I discussed in my last video, like Venezuela, that has debts denominated in somebody else's currency. All right. Moody's, S&P, Fitch, they're all idiots. They're all morons. In 2011, when Standard & Poor's downgraded the debt of the United States, the credit rating of the United States, I was on television that day, pounding the table, telling people to buy treasuries and to buy the stock market. Treasury yields after that downgrade dropped to historic all-time lows, okay? That is totally the opposite of what should have happened if Standard & Poor's was correct in its rating assessment of the United States. So rather than go back and re-examine their theory, their claim, as any serious scientifically based person would, again, if the empirical evidence does not support your theory, in any credible science, they would go back and try to figure out what was wrong. But no, only in economics does this never, ever happen, okay? So I'm bearish on treasuries right now just because I believe we will see rising inflation, and the Fed has miscalculated in how many rate hikes it sees moving out to 2020. Of course, the Fed could keep rates wherever it wants. It has nothing to do with inflation. It has nothing to do with anything. The Fed is the price setter, the rate setter. And as I have argued many times, the natural rate of interest for a currency issuing nation that is zero. All right, that is the natural rate of interest. But, if they want to keep rates positive, that's a fiscal operation that pays money to people, mostly wealthy people. You could be paying that, the government could be paying that to food stamps, it could be paying that to education, it could be paying that to healthcare, it could be paying that to fix our roads, it could be paying it to whatever it wants, but it chooses to do this idiotic issuance of treasuries and pay interest basically to wealthy people. So it's not that the Fed has to raise rates or lower rates, and the market doesn't dictate rates. The Fed is the monopolist on this. It sets it where it wants. But, it's dogma, so to speak. Its belief is that if inflation rises, that it has to raise rates to combat that, not understanding that rate hikes are price adjustments upward. They actually fuel the inflation. But let's get back to Standard & Poor's. Even though I'm bearish on treasuries on the view that the Fed will revise its expectation and have more rate hikes than it believes it will have, thus pushing treasury prices down over time, I feel like if Moody's does this thing, I'm sorry I said let's get back to S&P, let's get back to Moody's. If Moody's does downgrade and bonds go down, I think I'm going to buy them just because it's idiotic. It is completely and utterly stupid what they are doing. So they have no clue. So again, you have a wonderful example of these morons on Wall Street and in the realm of economics who think they're so smart and they're so much above everybody else. And they're so highly educated, and they are absolute, unequivocal idiots, stupid morons. That's what they are. So just letting you know, we will probably see a credit rating downgrade of the United. By the way, one thing, yeah, but Because, again, getting back to Moody's rationale, they said, well, the deficit's going to be too big. Do you know what, everybody? Let me give you a little fact. In 1943, when the United States was involved in World War II, the deficit as a percentage of GDP went to 34%. 34% of GDP. Right now, it's 3.4% of GDP. So it was 10 times bigger. In other words, the deficit would have been the equivalent, if we ran a 34% of GDP deficit right now, it would be something like 7 trillion would be the deficit. 7 trillion, right? In the middle of the financial crisis, it only got to 1.5 trillion. In 1943, it went to the equivalent of 7 trillion in today's terms. And guess what? It made our country rich. That deficit spending resulted in the creation of factories and real capital and the payment of salaries to people who worked during the wartime effort. And we're still living off of that wealth even today, generations after that happened. It didn't impoverish us. It made us rich as a nation. So there you go, Moody's, a little lesson in economics. See everybody later. Bye.